My name is Alara. I've always believed that if you're kind, quiet, and try to do everything right, then the people around you will be fair. But one day my family decided that my gentleness was a mistake. They kicked me out of the house. The people I loved accused me of lying, of betrayal, of things I hadn't done. I lost my job, I lost my house, and I almost lost faith in myself. But do you know what I realized? Sometimes the truth doesn't sound loud. She doesn't scream, she's just surviving. And when her time comes, she ruins everything that is built on lies. This is the story of how I got my name back, how she proved the truth in court, and how I built my life anew on the wreckage of what they tried to take away from me. Hi, my name's Alara. I'm 30 years old. I work as a nanny in a small daycare outside Asheville, and until 2 years ago, I truly believed my parents loved me. Not tolerated, not endured, loved. I lived with them after everything went sideways. After the breakup, the debt from nursing school, and the stress that left me with tremors in my hands, too unstable to handle injections. Being a nanny felt like failure at first, but then it felt like peace. I got to braid little girls' hair and read Goodnight Moon 6 times in a row and know what it looked like when a child felt safe. I thought I was safe too, until the night they turned on me. It was a Thursday, rain tapping on the kitchen windows like it wanted in. My mom was at the table folding towels. My dad sat across from her, reading something on his phone. I came in from work, still in my pale pink sweater with juice stains and glitter in my hair. "Dinner's in the oven," I said gently. "Hope it's okay." I added thyme to the potatoes. They didn't answer. Then my mom said, still folding, "Sit down, Alara." Something about her tone. Not tired, not angry. Final. I sat. "We had a visit," my dad said without looking at me. "From child services." My breath caught. "What?" "A neighbor reported suspicious behavior. Said you were inappropriately affectionate with the children at your daycare." My mouth went dry. "What? Who? What neighbor?" "It doesn't matter." My mom looked up finally. Her eyes were glassy, unreadable. "We told them you weren't that kind of girl." I blinked hard. Because that should have been the end of it. Only it wasn't. My dad slid a piece of paper across the table, a printed email from my boss at the daycare, termination notice. Effective immediately. "No," I whispered. No, this is a mistake. I didn't." "She said," my mom cut in, "that parents have been complaining for weeks, that you touch too much, talk too soft, cross boundaries." I stood up, hands shaking. "I would never, Mom, you know me." "We know what we thought we knew," she said coldly. I stepped back like I'd been slapped. Then came the real blow. "You need to pack your things," Dad said. "Tonight." My voice cracked. "You're kicking me out?" "We can't have this kind of attention on the house." "On us," Mom corrected. That's when I knew. They didn't care what was true. They only cared how I made them look. That night, I packed what I could into the trunk of my car. Suitcases, books, the blanket Grandma crocheted before she died. I didn't say goodbye. They didn't come to the door. I spent the night in the staff break room at the daycare, numb, silent, broken in ways I didn't yet have words for. The next morning, a message lit up my phone. Blocked number. "They're trying to bury you, but I've seen what you've really done. Call me." Attached was a photo, a child's drawing, my name written in crayon next to a smiling stick figure. I stared at it for a long time, then whispered to the room, "You're not taking this from me, too." And I called back, The voice on the other end was quiet. Male. Mid-30s, maybe. My name's Malik. I work maintenance at the daycare. I've seen how you are with the kids. You're not what they're saying. I closed my eyes, every breath shaky. Why are you helping me? He paused. Because someone lied about my sister once, and no one stood up for her until it was too late. Silence stretched. Then he said, check the alley behind the building. I left you something. An hour later, I was there, tucked behind the trash bins in a waterproof folder. Printouts, emails, screenshots. One showed my supervisor forwarding an anonymous complaint. Only the complaint wasn't from a parent. It was from my cousin, Serena. The same cousin who told me 2 months ago she couldn't believe someone as soft as you works with kids all day. I called Malik again, my fingers cold despite the May heat. She sent the complaint? She did. And the rest? Someone else edited it. You're being set up. My brain raced. Why? She wants your job. No one gets promoted from daycare. Not your job at the center. Your dad's referral. For the school counselor position, I froze. Weeks ago, my dad had offered to write a letter of recommendation for me. He said I had natural warmth with kids and should aim higher. Apparently, he gave that letter to someone else. And that someone turned me into the warning story. I drove all night after that, thinking, replaying memories, conversations that now sounded different, like the time my mom asked me what would happen if someone took things the wrong way when I hugged kids too long, or the way my cousin kept asking me about my job title, the hours, the benefits. They were laying groundwork. In the morning, I reached out to one person I knew would believe me. The mother of a child I'd nannied for during the pandemic. Her name was Jess, a lawyer. Her name was Jess, a lawyer. She called me back within 20 minutes. Alara, she said gently, do you want to fight this? I swallowed hard, then answered, yes, because this time I wasn't going to cry on the floor of a staff room. I was going to court, with every piece of proof I had, even if I had to build the whole case from the ground up. Jess arranged a meeting the next day. Before I walked in, she told me one thing. They're going to call you emotional, hysterical. They'll say you're overreacting. That's how they discredit gentle women. I nodded, because I wasn't walking in there to prove I wasn't soft. I was walking in to prove soft doesn't mean silent. And when they saw the evidence, that softness became strategy, the first brick in a case they thought I'd never have the courage to build. Jess didn't waste time. By Monday morning, we were sitting in her office, me with a spiral notebook full of memories and fragments, her with a legal pad and a voice that didn't flinch. We're not just proving you were lied about, she said, tapping her pen. We're going to show intent, pattern, malice. The words didn't fully sink in. I was still trying to believe someone would purposely ruin me. But the more we pieced things together, the clearer it became. Serena had started planting doubt months earlier. There were texts, ones I hadn't seen, between her and my mom. Screenshots Jess found by tracing cloud backups. Snide remarks about how Alara still plays Tea Party with toddlers. Comments like, she's too naive to notice how parents look at her. But the worst one? I told you she wouldn't push back. She never does. Jess leaned back and folded her hands. That's what they were counting on. I looked down at my hands, still shaking a little from the night before, and for the first time, I didn't feel embarrassed. I felt ready. We filed a defamation complaint that afternoon, limited scope, just enough to trigger a discovery process. By Thursday, we had court dates, and by Friday morning, I found myself sitting in a sterile room with gray carpet, cheap chairs, and my mother across the table. She didn't look at me, neither did my father. They sat on the same side as Serena, their lawyer whispering something in their ears. I'd imagined so many things I'd say when I saw them again, but when the time came, I said nothing. Jess did all the talking. She outlined the timeline, the accusations, the falsified complaint, the texts that indicated collusion, and then she handed the opposing counsel the folder labeled Behavioral Pattern Against the Plaintiff, dating back 5 years. Inside were witness statements from teachers I'd interned with, parents of the kids I used to nanny, even an old director from the nursing program who said, Alara was known for her gentleness, yes, but also for her integrity. When my mother finally looked at me, her mouth opened, but Jess cut her off. Any direct statements should be made on record. I watched her close again, like a door, and I realized something else. It wasn't grief I was feeling anymore. It was detachment. They weren't family, they were evidence, and I would treat them like such. When the deposition ended, Serena stood up quickly. She brushed past me at the door and hissed, "You don't know what you're doing." I turned slowly and said clearly, "Neither did you," because she never thought I'd fight. They never imagined I'd walk into a courtroom with proof, and next week, we'd walk into court, where silence wasn't going to protect them anymore. The days leading up to the first hearing felt like walking through fog with fire under my skin. At night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing Serena's voice, the way she laughed when I got my first daycare job. "It's cute," she'd said, "you pretending to matter to someone." And now she was pretending I never did. Jess and I met every evening, sometimes at her office, sometimes at her kitchen table, surrounded by legal pads and mugs of strong tea. "We don't need them to apologize," she reminded me. "We need them on record." It helped, sort of. What helped more was the letter that came in the mail on Wednesday. No return address, just my name, handwritten in blue ink. Inside was a note. She helped my daughter speak again, after her father left, after the tantrums and shutdowns. Alara sat with her every day in the reading nook. "You didn't just change her life, you gave it back to her. No name, just that." I cried, but not from weakness, from anger, because that little girl remembered me. And yet my own parents didn't believe I was worth defending. Jess suggested we bring character witnesses to the stand. I didn't want to. "I'm not asking people to vouch for who I am," I said. "I want the lies to speak for themselves." She nodded. "We can do that." She nodded. "We can do that." Instead, we focused on the forged paperwork, the altered emails, the daycare report that was rewritten after the fact, and something else, a bank transfer from my father's account to Serena's 4 days before the complaint was filed. 1,500, Jess said, circling the amount, labeled as consulting. "What do you bet it's for framing you?" I stared at the line item. That was the month I'd skipped my car insurance payment just to buy art supplies for the daycare kids. And he was paying Serena to ruin me. I didn't sleep that night either. But this time, I wasn't afraid. I was furious. And I knew exactly what to do with that fury. We'd let the courtroom see it all. Not the tears, not the trauma, but the truth. Laid out piece by piece, like the blocks the children used to build castles. And just like those kids, I'd show them. You can't knock down what's been built on a solid base, not without getting crushed by what falls. The morning of the hearing, I stood in front of my mirror with the same pale pink sweater I'd been wearing the night they kicked me out. It was faded now, but clean, pressed. I braided my hair simply and placed a small flower pin just behind my ear. One of the kids had gifted it to me before her graduation day. As I stepped into the courthouse lobby, I spotted Serena adjusting her blazer. My mother was there too. She looked at me like she didn't recognize who I'd become. And maybe she didn't, because I didn't flinch. I didn't lower my eyes. I walked past them both, and when I entered that courtroom, I didn't bring vengeance. I brought proof. In a folder Jess carried like a weapon. Courtrooms are colder than they look in movies. Not just the temperature, though the AC vents above the gallery were blasting full force, but the silence, the hush that comes when truth is about to be tested. Jess stood beside me as we waited for the judge. Across the aisle, Serena whispered something to her attorney. My parents didn't speak, not to me, not to each other. When the bailiff called us to rise, my legs trembled, but not from fear, from memory, the kind of memory that sinks into your bones. The look on my mother's face when she handed me that termination letter. The way my father stood at the door and said, "Don't make a scene." Now, they couldn't avoid the scene. It was center stage. Our first motion was simple, a request for injunction against further defamatory contact and presentation of preliminary evidence. Jess presented it methodically. Exhibits A through J, screenshots of manipulated emails, metadata logs showing Serena edited the documents hours after they were allegedly submitted to daycare leadership. And then the financial transfer, $1,500 from my dad to Serena, dated 3 days before the anonymous complaint was filed. The opposing counsel stammered. This could be for anything, which is why we subpoenaed the memo field, Jess said coolly. She passed a printed screenshot to the judge. Memo, consulting, daycare prep. That phrase sat in the air like smoke no one could wave away. My mother leaned over, whispering urgently to their lawyer. He tried to speak. The judge raised her hand. Save it for response testimony. And then she turned to me. Miss Langley, would you like to make a statement? I stood, and for a moment, just a moment, I saw the room blur. Not from tears, from every memory that had led me here. I swallowed. My name is Alara Langley. I've worked with children since I was 17. I've held their hands when they were sick, sat with them through grief, helped them speak again after silence. And the people you see across from me, they knew that. I let that sink in. They didn't misunderstand who I was. They knew exactly. And they used that to make me look weak, because to them, softness was liability, not strength. I paused. My mistake wasn't being too emotional. My mistake was thinking love meant protection, but it didn't. Not for them. The judge gave a single nod. We'll proceed with evidentiary review next Thursday. Until then, this courtroom recognizes preliminary credibility of the plaintiff's materials. Adjourned. The gavel came down like thunder in my chest, and it was only the beginning. Outside the courthouse, the air felt different. Not freer, not clearer, just heavier with what still had to be done. Jess took me to a cafe around the corner. We sat in the back near a window, and she pulled out her laptop. I want to warn you, she said. They're going to counter, probably claim instability. Maybe bring up medical records or old counseling notes if they can get their hands on them. My stomach turned. She saw it and added, "We'll block them, but you need to be ready for the emotional part. They're not just fighting to protect Serena. They're fighting to preserve a version of themselves. That version didn't include me, or rather, it painted me as fragile, as a liability, as someone too easy to push out of the frame." We spent the next 3 hours reviewing timelines. Everything from my early years as a nursing student to the informal nanny work I took during the pandemic. There was a clear history, glowing references, thank you letters from families, even photos of handmade gifts from kids I'd helped over the years. Jess compiled them into a binder. When she closed the cover, she said softly, "It's hard to weaponize a record like this." That night, I went back to the basement apartment I was renting short-term from an older widow named Patricia. She met me at the door with tea and a blanket. "You looked like you fought ghosts today," she said gently. "I did," I whispered. She didn't ask more, just sat beside me while I stared at the wall. Later, as I lay in bed, I pulled out one of the drawings a little boy had made me. A scribbly heart with the word Miss Ilara underneath. And for the first time since it all began, I whispered out loud, "I'm going to win this." Not just for myself, but for every gentlewoman they tried to silence, and for the truth that had waited long enough. The next day brought a surprise. A letter slid under Patricia's door. No stamp, no envelope, just a single folded page with my name scrawled across it in ink I recognized. My mother's handwriting. Inside, 5 words. "You always had to ruin everything." No explanation, no apology. Just that bitterness I'd carried in silence since childhood, pressed onto paper. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at it. Then I folded it once, slowly, and dropped it into the trash. Then I folded it once, slowly, and dropped it into the trash. Let her try to rewrite the story. Let her cling to whatever control she thought she had. I had something she'd never understand. A record. A lawyer who believed me. And a courtroom that finally was going to hear the truth. The following week, we got access to the daycare's internal audit files. Jess had filed a motion requesting logs, parent communications, and archived complaint records. They tried to stall, claimed delays, said their system was under maintenance. But Jess had expected that and filed a court order. By Friday, we had everything, and what we found made my hands shake. There was no record of any formal complaint before Serena's message. No parent emails, no red flags, no inappropriate behavior reports. In fact, the only document flagged was a message from a parent dated 6 months ago. "Miss Ilara is the reason my son smiles at school again." Jess read it twice, then turned to me and said, "They're going to regret pushing this into discovery." We found more. The altered complaint had been edited 3 times, each time from a different IP address. One matched Serena's home Wi-Fi, one traced back to my parents' house, and the last, a public library system used the day after I'd already been fired, likely to cover tracks. Every line of that report had been built like a weapon, and now it was turning back on them. I printed out the logs, highlighted the inconsistencies, and stacked them beside witness statements and character references. The pile of truth was growing, and so was something else. Confidence. Not loud, not explosive, but steady, like breath. That weekend, I got a call from the daycare director, the same woman who'd fired me. Her voice was thin. "Ilara, we may have made a hasty decision." I didn't say anything. She continued, If you'd like to meet and talk about reinstatement, Jess was on speaker. She shook her head. No, I said flatly. We're not undoing this with a meeting. We're resolving it in court. The woman sighed. I understand. It's just, things look different now. They always do, I thought, when the lie starts to crack. She hung up without another word, but her silence confirmed everything. They were afraid, because I wasn't supposed to fight, and certainly not with this kind of clarity. Monday morning, Jess handed me a flash drive. Security footage, she said, from the daycare lobby. I opened it later that night, hands trembling. Said she was worried. I was harming myself. I blinked at the screen when Jess told me that. She weaponized your sensitivity, she said. Classic manipulation tactic. That night, I wrote down every red flag I'd ignored. The way Serena always joked about me being a doormat. The way my parents never corrected her. The way she borrowed my sweaters, my notebooks, my words, and then told people I was clingy. I didn't sleep, but I didn't cry either. The girl who used to hide in her car during lunch breaks was gone. Now I was making a list, a map, and I planned to burn every lie they'd built, one document at a time. The hearing was scheduled for Thursday. Jess told me to be ready. They're going to pivot, she warned. Try to paint you as vindictive, as unstable. They'll say this lawsuit is retaliation. I laughed, bitter. It's not retaliation, it's reclamation. The courtroom was fuller than usual that day. Word had spread. Small town curiosity. I wore my lavender cardigan, the one my favorite student once called princess color. Across from me, Serena wore white, like innocence could be sewn into fabric. Their side opened strong, emphasizing how difficult I'd been as a teenager, how I'd dropped out of nursing, how I'd never really been able to handle pressure. Their lawyer used words like emotional turbulence and fragile temperament. Jess let him finish, then stood, calm and sharp, and unleashed hell. She walked the court through every forged login, every IP trace, every contradiction in Serena's original complaint. She played audio from a staff member. Serena said she hoped Alara would get reassigned, that she'd been angling for her job. Then Jess handed the judge the flash drive. Security footage, Your Honor, proving timeline inconsistencies and clear intent to manipulate. When it played, when the room saw Serena walk into that daycare, smirking and pacing, something shifted. Even my mother looked pale. Jess closed her argument with a single line. Softness isn't weakness, and lies don't become truth just because they come from family. The judge didn't rule that day, but I already knew. The moment had turned, not just for the case, for me, because I'd finally stopped being silent, and silence was never my power. Truth was, the courtroom was silent when we walked in that morning. It wasn't just another hearing. It was the verdict, the culmination of every sleepless night, every printed document, every moment I thought I might break. I sat down next to Jess, hands clasped, heart steady for once. She didn't look at me, just squeezed my knee gently. Across the aisle, Serena avoided my eyes. My parents looked like they hadn't slept. The judge entered, robe flowing, expression unreadable. She took her seat, adjusted her glasses, then began. In the matter of Langley versus Langley and affiliates, on charges of defamation, malicious interference with employment, and fraudulent misrepresentation. The air went still. She continued, "The court finds in favor of the plaintiff." I didn't move. I didn't blink, because it wasn't real yet. The judge's voice droned on. Compensation, sealed records, mandatory apologies. But I barely heard it, because what mattered had already happened. They lied, and I proved it. Jess leaned in. You won. The words didn't register, until Serena stood up too quickly. Her lawyer pulled her back into her seat. My mother's lips parted, then closed again. No apology, no acknowledgement, and I didn't need one, because I hadn't fought for their recognition. I fought to reclaim mine. After court, Jess and I walked outside. The sky was cloudless, blue like peace. What now? She asked. I thought about it. I'm not going back to the daycare, I said. Not even if they offer. She nodded. I want to start something, I added. A space for kids who've been hurt by instability. Something that isn't tied to institutions that fail people like me. Jess smiled. Then that's what we'll do. That word stayed with me all day, because I wasn't alone anymore. Not in the way that mattered. That night, I packed the last of my things from the rental. Patricia hugged me tightly. You reminded me why we don't stay quiet. I smiled. You reminded me I didn't have to. I moved into a small upstairs apartment near the edge of town. Bright windows, chipped tile, and a tiny nook that would one day be the reading corner for the nonprofit I was planning. I called it Bright Steps, a safe space for children who needed stability, care, and someone who listened. Word spread fast. Parents from the daycare called me, not with judgment, but with apologies, one by one. I'm sorry I believed them. I wish I'd asked you first. You were always kind to my son. I didn't hold it against them, because I knew now. People believe what's easy to hear. Because I knew now, people believe what's easy to hear. And it had been easier to believe Serena than question why someone like me, quiet, steady, soft, could be the one telling the truth. 3 weeks later, I received a certified envelope. Inside, an apology letter, court-mandated, Serena's handwriting. I'm sorry for the harm I caused. I acted out of jealousy, and I regret the pain I created. No signature, no heart, just ink. Still, I tucked it into my file, labeled **, proof, **. Not because I needed the words, but because it was the first time anyone in that house was forced to face what they'd done. My mother never wrote. My father sent a single line by email. Hope you're doing okay. I archived it. Didn't respond. Because this story wasn't about them anymore. It was mine now. Entirely. Months passed. Bright Steps opened officially in early spring. The walls were painted pale yellow. Sunlight poured in through wide windows. Children sat cross-legged on mats, read stories, laughed without looking over their shoulders. And I stood by the door, clipboard in hand, welcoming a new parent, a woman with tired eyes and a nervous voice. My daughter doesn't talk much, she whispered. Her last school said she was a problem. I knelt beside the little girl, smiled. That's okay, I said. We don't call quiet a problem here. The girl blinked and took my hand. Later that evening, I sat at my desk, sorting forms, reviewing snack orders, and I saw it, a drawing tucked into my notebook, crayons, scribbled stars, and the words, Miss Alara makes the world soft again. I didn't cry. I just placed it beside the old drawing from years ago. One said, thank you. The other said, you matter. Together, they told a story I no longer needed anyone else to believe. Because I lived it. And no one, not even the people who raised me, could take that from me again. One Sunday morning, I took a walk past the street I used to call home. The house looked the same, white siding, blue shutters, the porch swing I once painted with my dad still hanging lopsided. I stopped across the road, didn't step closer. I didn't need to. A figure stood at the window. My mother. She saw me and didn't wave. I didn't expect her to. I just nodded once. A silent acknowledgement that I'd survived, that I was still standing, that she hadn't won. Then I turned and walked away. Not out of defiance, but out of peace. Because you can't rebuild your life while dragging ruins behind you. And I wasn't built to haunt places that never protected me. I was built to create new ones. That night, I lit a candle beside my window. Let the flame burn quietly. Not for revenge, but for resilience, for softness, and for every woman told her voice was too quiet to be heard. Until it echoed in a courtroom, louder than any lie they could print. It's been a year. 12 months since I walked out of that courtroom with my dignity intact and their lies laid bare. Bright Steps has grown. We have 6 staff now, 32 kids, 2 classrooms, a partnership with the community clinic down the block. Some mornings I still wake before dawn, heart pounding like I forgot something important. But I didn't. I just remember how it used to feel. The silence, the ache, the sense that love was conditional, earned, never given freely. That version of me is gone. Last month, a journalist reached out. She'd heard about the case, wanted to do a feature. I hesitated, then agreed. Not for vengeance, but for the others. The ones who still whisper, maybe I'm imagining it, when their families twist the truth. The article went live last week. The title was simple: The Nanny They Tried to Silence. It spread faster than I expected. Messages poured in. Other women, other survivors, even other teachers who'd been pushed out for being too soft, too emotional, or too much. They thanked me. But all I could think was, you don't owe me thanks. We all deserve to be believed. One afternoon, I found an envelope on our daycare front desk. No stamp, no name. Just, for Alara. Written in a familiar, looping hand. Inside was a photograph, me and my father, from years ago, at a park. I must have been 11. On the back, scrawled in ink, I remember the day you stopped calling me Dad. I didn't blame you. I just didn't know how to fix it. I hope you're okay now. It wasn't an apology, but it was something. I folded it slowly, placed it in the drawer marked *past. Not because I needed to hold it close, but because I didn't need it to follow me into tomorrow. In April, we hosted our first open house. Parents toured the classrooms. Children dragged their parents by the hand to show off paintings, glitter crafts, and shelves stacked with picture books. In one corner of the wall, I'd framed 2 of those old drawings from my past students. The ones that reminded me why I stayed. The ones that reminded me why I stayed. A reporter who stopped by asked me, "What's the biggest thing you've learned from all of this?" I paused for a long moment, then said, "That strength isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the quiet woman who doesn't leave, even when the world tells her she should." She wrote that down, word for word. Later that week, Serena's name popped up in a community article. She'd moved to a different city, tried to open her own tutoring program. It had failed within 2 months. There were whispers. Of course there were. But I didn't care anymore. Not in the bitter way. Just in the way that happens when you've finally grown beyond someone's reach. One morning, I got a message from an unfamiliar number, just a single line. "Do you ever think about coming back?" I stared at the screen for a while before responding. I never left. I just stopped letting them decide where I belong. There was no reply, and I didn't need one. Summer arrived early that year. The garden behind Bright Steps exploded with sunflowers and mint and chalk drawings on the sidewalk. We hosted storytelling circles every Friday. And one day, a little boy with a speech delay whispered his first full sentence while holding my hand. "You make it safe." I excused myself and stepped outside, not to cry, just to breathe. Because healing isn't loud either. Sometimes it's the soft moment when a child feels seen, or when a woman, once labeled weak, becomes a lighthouse for others. That night, after everyone left, I sat alone in the circle of tiny chairs and looked around. The quiet hum of the fridge, a single streamer fluttering from the ceiling, the echo of laughter that had already gone home. And I whispered, not to anyone, but to myself, "You built this. You." There would be more battles ahead, but I knew now I could face them, because truth stays standing longer than the people who run from it. And love, the real kind, isn't earned by being silent. It's built by surviving everything they said you couldn't, and creating light anyway.